Marissa Cole never expected her quiet life as a hotel cleaner to lead her into a web of danger and deceit. But one overheard conversation, a chilling plot to commit murder, changes everything. Suddenly, she's thrust into a high-stakes battle against one of the city's most powerful and dangerous women. As Marissa uncovers hidden truths about her father's untimely death, she finds herself risking everything to bring a corrupt empire to its knees. With her own life on the line, every decision she makes could mean the difference between justice and survival. What secrets will she uncover? And how far will she go to fight for the truth? Join Marissa on a journey of courage and redemption that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to comment with your thoughts on her incredible story. Subscribe for more gripping narratives, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Now let's begin the story. Marissa Cole's mornings were routine to the point of monotony. As the sun peeked through the worn blinds of her tiny apartment in Queens, she brewed a cup of weak coffee and pulled on her faded uniform, steeling herself for another day of invisibility. Working as a cleaner at the prestigious Empire Crown Hotel wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills barely. Her father's death years ago had left her with nothing but memories and a gnawing question about the so-called accident that claimed his life. The hotel's polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers reflected a world Marissa only existed to maintain. Guests glided past her without a second glance, as though she were part of the decor. It was a life lived in the background, but Marissa had grown accustomed to being unseen. One afternoon, she was assigned to clean the penthouse suite, a rare privilege. Daniel Hayes, a reclusive billionaire known for his philanthropic ventures, was staying there. Marissa had never met him, but rumors about his impending divorce from Rebecca Carrington, his glamorous wife, had become tabloid fodder. As Marissa dusted the sprawling suite, voices from the adjoining study caught her attention. The door was slightly ajar, and she paused, the words sharp and hushed. "He'll never see it coming." Rebecca's voice dripped with malice. "This trip will be his last." A man's voice, smooth and confident, replied, "We'll make sure it looks like an accident. He trusts me completely." Marissa's stomach churned. She knew she should leave, but her feet remained rooted. Rebecca Carrington, Daniel's wife, was plotting his murder with another man. The weight of what she'd overheard pressed on her as she cleaned. She wrestled with her conscience. Should she say something? But to whom? The police wouldn't take her seriously, and Rebecca was powerful, dangerous. Her resolve crystallized when she spotted Daniel's briefcase on the desk. Scribbling a hasty note, she slipped it inside. "Your trip is dangerous. Don't go. Someone close to you is planning something terrible." Marissa left the room, her heart pounding. She doubted Daniel would even see the note, let alone believe it. But she couldn't do nothing. The next day, news spread among the staff that Daniel had abruptly canceled his business trip. Marissa felt a flicker of relief. Perhaps her warning had worked. That evening, as she returned to her modest apartment, she noticed a sleek black car parked outside. A man in a tailored suit approached her, his expression neutral. "Miss Cole?" he asked, extending an envelope. Marissa hesitated before taking it. Inside was a crisp note. "Thank you for your concern. I've canceled the trip. Enclosed is something I believe will help you." A small key fell into her palm, engraved with the address of an upscale apartment building downtown. Marissa stood frozen, torn between suspicion and gratitude. Why would Daniel Hayes, a billionaire, help her? Did he know who she was? Or was this some elaborate test? She spent the night pacing, her mind racing with possibilities. By morning, she made her decision. She packed her belongings and boarded a subway bound for Manhattan, clutching the key like a lifeline. When she arrived at the high-rise building, a doorman greeted her warmly and directed her to the 15th floor. The apartment was breathtaking floor-to-ceiling windows, sleek furniture, and a view of the city that felt surreal. But as Marissa settled into her new surroundings, unease gnawed at her. The walls of luxury felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. And as the shadows of night crept in, so did a chilling realization. Rebecca wasn't the type to let loose and stay untied. Marissa stood in the middle of the luxurious apartment, her bag slumped at her feet. Everything about this place screamed excess. The spotless hardwood floors, the plush furniture, the massive television embedded in the wall. She ran her fingers along the edge of the granite kitchen countertop, trying to reconcile this stark contrast with her cramped, dingy apartment in Queens. The thought struck her suddenly, what if this wasn't a gift? What if this was a trap? She hadn't met Daniel Hayes. She had no idea what kind of man he was. Could he be testing her, trying to buy her silence? She shook the thought away. The note had been clear. He'd thanked her for the warning, even canceled his trip. Maybe he was simply grateful. But gratitude didn't explain why she felt like a pawn in someone else's game. Marissa was pulled from her thoughts by a knock at the door. Her breath caught as she approached it cautiously, peeking through the peephole. A man stood on the other side, sharply dressed and holding a briefcase. "Miss Cole?" he asked when she opened the door a crack. His voice was calm but authoritative. "Yes," she replied hesitantly. "I'm Colin Reed, Mr. Hayes' assistant. He asked me to check in on you and ensure you're settling in." He offered a faint, reassuring smile, though his gaze was sharp, assessing. Marissa stepped aside, letting him in. Colin's presence was both intimidating and comforting. He exuded the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes situations. "This is all very sudden," Marissa said, crossing her arms. "Why would Mr. Hayes do this for me? I'm just no one." Colin set his briefcase down and opened it, revealing a folder. "Mr. Hayes values loyalty. You risked a great deal by warning him. He felt it was only right to provide you with a safe place, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Marissa pressed. Colin hesitated before replying. "Mrs. Carrington is a formidable woman. She doesn't take betrayal lightly. Mr. Hayes believes she may try to uncover who warned him." The weight of his words hit Marissa like a freight train. Rebecca knew someone had interfered, and it was only a matter of time before she started looking for answers. That evening, as Marissa tried to settle into her new home, her phone buzzed. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Miss Cole." A female voice purred on the other end. Or should I say, the maid who doesn't know her place? Marissa's blood turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Come now, darling," the voice continued, dripping with venom. "You know exactly who I am. You thought you could interfere with my plans, and there wouldn't be consequences?" "Rebecca, I don't know what you're talking about," Marissa said, trying to sound braver than she felt. A low, chilling laugh echoed through the line. "Stay where you were, little mouse. I'll find you soon enough." The line went dead, leaving Marissa gripping her phone with trembling hands. Her heart raced as the walls of the luxurious apartment closed in on her. The fear gnawed at her, but so did something stronger anger. Rebecca Carrington wasn't just threatening her. She was threatening the truth. Marissa thought of her father, Robert Cole, a man who had always taught her to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. His death had always felt too convenient, too sudden. Could Rebecca have had something to do with it? Marissa knew she couldn't go to the police without evidence. But she also couldn't stay silent. She needed answers, and the only person who could provide them was Daniel Hayes. The next day, Marissa reached out to Colin, asking to meet Daniel. Hours later, she found herself seated in a sleek black car, her stomach in knots as they approached an expansive office building in Manhattan. Daniel Hayes was nothing like she expected. He was younger, sharper, his presence commanding the room as he entered. Marissa stood as he approached, his piercing blue eyes studying her. "Miss Cole," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming. And thank you for the warning." Marissa shook his hand, her voice wavering. "I didn't know what else to do. I overheard something." Daniel motioned for her to sit, leaning against the edge of his desk. "Rebecca is dangerous," he said bluntly. "You were right to warn me. But now, you're in her sights. She doesn't leave loose ends." Marissa swallowed hard. "Why does she want you dead?" Daniel's expression darkened. "Let's just say our marriage has been more about appearances than love for a long time. I've uncovered things: embezzlement, betrayal that she doesn't want the world to know. She'd rather see me dead than let me expose her." Marissa felt a spark of determination. She won't get away with this. Not if we can stop her. Daniel regarded her with a mix of respect and caution. "We? Miss Cole, You've already risked too much. Rebecca threatened me last night, Marissa said, her voice steady despite her fear. I'm already involved, and I'm not just going to sit here and wait for her to come after me. Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line before he nodded. Very well, but if you're going to be part of this, we need to be smart about it. Rebecca won't hesitate to destroy anyone in her way. As Marissa left Daniel's office, the gravity of her decision settled over her. She was no longer just a hotel cleaner trying to survive. She was stepping into a battle with a woman who had no limits. That night, she returned to her apartment, her resolve hardening. She didn't know how far Rebecca would go, but one thing was certain: Marissa wouldn't go down without a fight. Marissa stood by the window, looking out at the glittering city lights. For years, she'd felt invisible, powerless. But now, for the first time, she felt something else: purpose. As she traced her father's name on the edge of the key Daniel had given her, she whispered, "I'll find the truth. For you, Dad." The shadows of the night stretched long, but Marissa was ready to face them. Marissa's first days in her new apartment were filled with unease. She tried to adjust to the sprawling space, but it felt cold and alien. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant hum of the building's heating system set her nerves on edge. Even the spectacular view of the city skyline, something she'd dreamed of her entire life, did little to ease her discomfort. Rebecca's voice still echoed in her mind. "You've made a mistake." Marissa spent most of her time pacing, scrolling through the contacts Colin had left her, and debating whether to call Daniel or the police. But what could she say? Her connection to Daniel was tenuous at best, and the police weren't going to take her word against Rebecca Carrington's unless she had undeniable proof. One night, as she walked home from a grocery run, Marissa noticed a car following her. The sleek black sedan was parked across the street when she left the store, its headlights off. When she quickened her pace, the car crept forward. Her heart raced as she approached her building. She ducked into an alley and pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow. The car paused at the corner, its engine idling. Then, after what felt like an eternity, it drove off. Marissa leaned against the brick wall, trembling. Rebecca wasn't just threatening her, she was watching. Marissa called Colin the next morning. "I need to speak to Daniel. Now!" Within an hour, she was sitting across from Daniel in his penthouse office. The large windows behind him framed the city skyline, but her focus was on his serious expression. "She knows where I am," Marissa said, her voice trembling. "She's sending people to watch me. What am I supposed to do?" Daniel leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Rebecca doesn't play games, Marissa. If she's watching you, it's because she sees you as a threat." "I didn't ask for this," Marissa snapped, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wanted to do the right thing. Now I'm caught in the middle of some twisted power struggle." Daniel's expression softened. "I know you didn't ask for this, but you're stronger than you think, and you're not alone in this anymore." Marissa's anger faded, replaced by a spark of determination. "Then help me. Tell me what I can do." In the following days, Daniel shared more about Rebecca's web of deceit. She had been embezzling funds from his companies, laundering money through shell corporations, and using her family's influence to cover her tracks. But as they dug deeper, a shocking revelation came to light. Daniel showed Marissa a file containing old financial records. Among them was the name Robert Cole, her father. "What does this mean?" Marissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father worked as a financial consultant for Rebecca's father," Daniel explained. "These records show he uncovered illegal activities and was planning to go public." Marissa's heart sank. "But he didn't. He died in a car accident." Daniel hesitated, his gaze heavy with meaning. "It wasn't an accident, Marissa." Rebecca's family silenced him before he could expose them. The room spun. Marissa gripped the edge of the table, her mind racing. Her father's death, the struggles her family endured, it had all been orchestrated. That night, Marissa couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were consumed by the realization that Rebecca's family had destroyed hers. She paced the apartment, replaying every memory of her father. Then, a sharp knock at the door startled her. She froze, her heart pounding. Slowly, she approached and looked through the peephole. No one was there. When she opened the door, she found a small envelope on the floor. Inside was a single photograph, her walking on the street, taken earlier that day. On the back, scrawled in red ink, were the words, "Keep quiet, or you'll end up like him." Marissa showed the photograph to Daniel the next day. He examined it, his jaw tightening. "She's trying to scare you into silence. It's a classic move." "Well, it's working," Marissa admitted, her voice breaking. "But I can't let her win. Not after what she did to my father." Daniel nodded. "Then we need to find the proof that ties her to his death. Without it, the police won't act." Daniel arranged a meeting with Detective Lydia Walsh, an NYPD officer known for her unflinching determination to take down powerful criminals. Lydia listened carefully as Marissa recounted everything she'd learned. "You've got guts, Marissa," Lydia said, her tone admiring. "But if we're going to take Rebecca down, we need solid evidence. No loopholes." "What about Rebecca's family estate?" Daniel suggested. "That's where she keeps her most sensitive records." Lydia frowned. "It's risky, but if we can get a warrant, we might find what we need." Rebecca's influence made obtaining a warrant nearly impossible. They decided on a more dangerous route, a covert break-in. Daniel, Marissa, and Lydia began planning their infiltration of Rebecca's estate. Colin provided floor plans, highlighting the study where Rebecca's father's records were kept. "You're sure about this?" Daniel asked Marissa one evening as they finalized the plan. "No," Marissa admitted, "but I don't see another way. If I back down now, she wins, and my father deserves justice." As the day of the break-in approached, Marissa's fear was overshadowed by determination. Rebecca's threats only fueled her resolve. In a quiet moment alone, Marissa looked at a photo of her father. "I'll make this right," she whispered. "I promise." The days leading up to the break-in were fraught with tension. Though Marissa, Daniel, and Detective Lydia Walsh shared a common goal, their differing methods often clashed. "You're asking Marissa to risk everything," Lydia argued during one meeting at Daniel's office. "This isn't her fight, it's yours." "It became her fight when Rebecca targeted her," Daniel countered. "I won't let her face this alone." Marissa interjected, her voice firm. "I can speak for myself. I'm in this because of my father. I want to do this." The determination in her voice silenced the room. Lydia gave a resigned nod. "All right, but we do this my way. If something feels off, we abort." "Agreed?" Marissa and Daniel exchanged a look before nodding. They didn't like it, but they understood the risks. Colin provided key intel about Rebecca's family estate, a sprawling property in upstate New York. The estate was rumored to house decades of family secrets, locked away in a hidden safe within the study. "It's not just about getting in," Colin explained. "You need to get out before anyone realizes you're there. Security is minimal, but Rebecca has people who check in regularly." Marissa studied the blueprints Colin had laid out. "What about cameras?" "Disabled," Colin replied, "but only for a short window. Once you're inside, it's on you." Every detail of the plan was scrutinized. Marissa spent sleepless nights rehearsing her role, every nerve in her body taut with anticipation. Meanwhile, Detective Walsh uncovered more about Rebecca's reach. Interviews with former employees and business associates painted a damning picture. "She's not just manipulative," Lydia told Marissa one evening. "She's ruthless. People who cross her don't just lose their jobs, they disappear. And she's been at this for years." Marissa's stomach churned. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Lydia sighed. "Money, power, fear. She knows how to cover her tracks." Marissa clenched her fists. Not this time. Rebecca's paranoia grew as rumors of Daniel's investigation spread. She began making public appearances, projecting an image of a scorned but resilient woman. "She's trying to control the narrative," Daniel observed as he watched a televised interview. In it, Rebecca spoke tearfully about her estranged husband's betrayal, subtly discrediting him. "She's preparing for a fight," Lydia said grimly. "She knows something's coming." For Marissa, the interview was chilling. Rebecca's polished exterior barely masked the venom beneath. It was a reminder of just how dangerous she was. The night before the break-in, Marissa sat alone in the apartment Daniel had provided. She stared out at the city lights, her mind racing. She thought of her father, his laugh, his unwavering support, the way he always encouraged her to stand up for what was right. But she also thought of the danger she was walking into. "What would you do, Dad?" she whispered, clutching a small photograph of him. The answer came not in words, but in the memory of his kindness and integrity. He wouldn't have backed down. Neither would she. The following evening, Marissa, Daniel, and Lydia drove to the estate under the cover of darkness. The atmosphere in the car was tense, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them. As they approached the gates, Colin's intel proved accurate. The security system had been disabled remotely, giving them a brief window to act. Daniel parked the car a safe distance away, and they slipped through the gates, keeping to the shadows. The estate loomed ahead, its darkened windows and overgrown grounds giving it an eerie air. Marissa's pulse raced as they reached the side entrance. Lydia picked the lock with practiced efficiency, and they slipped inside. The interior of the estate was as opulent as it was foreboding. Dust-covered furniture and faded portraits of Rebecca's ancestors hinted at a bygone era of wealth and power. Marissa stayed close to Daniel as they navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Lydia led the way, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. "Study's this way," Lydia whispered, motioning for them to follow. When they reached the study, Marissa's breath caught. It was a grand room, its walls lined with bookshelves and a massive desk at its center. But their target was the safe, hidden behind a panel in the far wall. Daniel and Lydia worked quickly, using tools Colin had provided to access the hidden compartment. Marissa kept watch by the door, every creak of the floorboards making her flinch. "Got it," Daniel whispered as the panel slid open, revealing a small safe. Lydia stepped in, expertly working the combination lock. Within minutes, the safe clicked open, revealing a trove of documents. Marissa's hands trembled as she helped sort through the papers. Among them were bank statements, emails, and letters, all tying Rebecca and her family to years of corruption, including evidence suggesting her father's murder had been orchestrated. "This is it," Lydia said, her voice low but triumphant. "This is what we need." Just as they prepared to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Marissa froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "Someone's here," she whispered. The group scrambled to hide, pressing themselves into the shadows as the study door creaked open. Rebecca entered, flanked by two men. Her sharp gaze swept the room before settling on the open safe. Her lips curled into a dangerous smile. "Well, well," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like I have uninvited guests." Rebecca turned toward the shadows where Marissa and the others were hiding. "Come out, little mice," she said, her tone cold. "Let's see how brave you really are." Marissa's breath caught. Her hands clenched into fists as she prepared for what was to come. Marissa's breath came in shallow gasps as Rebecca Carrington's mocking voice filled the study. She remained hidden in the shadows, her heart pounding. Daniel's hand brushed against hers, a silent reassurance that she wasn't alone. Rebecca's sharp eyes scanned the room. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," she said, her tone laced with venom. "Breaking into my family's estate. Bold, but foolish." Marissa clenched her fists, the weight of her father's memory pressing down on her. She wanted to step forward, to confront Rebecca, but she couldn't risk blowing their cover. One of Rebecca's henchmen approached the safe, his expression darkening as he inspected the open compartment. "It's empty," he said. Rebecca's smile faltered. Her voice turned icy. "Find them. Now!" The men fanned out, their footsteps heavy on the hardwood floors. Marissa's mind raced. They had minutes, seconds, maybe before they were discovered. Lydia gestured toward a side door, her movements quick and precise. Marissa, Daniel, and Lydia slipped through it just as one of the henchmen approached their hiding spot. They crept through the darkened hallways, the stolen documents tucked securely in Daniel's bag. Every sound seemed amplified: the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of clothing, the distant hum of the estate's power. Rebecca's voice echoed faintly behind them. "Lock the gates. They're still here." Marissa's pulse quickened as they reached the back entrance. Lydia disabled the lock with deft hands, and they slipped outside into the cool night air. The estate's sprawling grounds stretched before them, offering little cover. "This way," Lydia whispered, motioning toward a line of trees. They sprinted across the lawn, their breaths visible in the crisp air. Behind them, flashlights danced through the darkness, accompanied by the shouts of Rebecca's men. They reached the safety of the tree line, crouching behind thick trunks as the search intensified. Marissa's chest heaved as she struggled to catch her breath. "We can't outrun them," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. "We don't need to," Lydia said, pulling out her phone. "I called for backup before we came in. They're almost here." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You didn't tell us that." Lydia's gaze was steady. "I didn't want to spook you. But you're welcome." Marissa looked back toward the estate. Rebecca stood on the balcony, her silhouette framed by the dim light from inside. Even at a distance, her posture radiated fury. "Let's move," Lydia urged. "We need to be clear when they arrive." As they made their way through the woods, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Rebecca's men faltered, their flashlights flickering uncertainly. Moments later, squad cars pulled up to the estate, their blue and red lights cutting through the darkness. Officers poured out, surrounding the property. Marissa, Daniel, and Lydia emerged from the trees, waving to the officers. Detective Walsh, Lydia's superior, approached them with a firm nod. "You got the evidence?" Walsh asked. Daniel handed over the bag. "It's all here. Enough to tie Rebecca and her family to years of corruption and my wife to attempted murder." The officers moved swiftly, entering the estate. Rebecca's protests echoed through the night as she was led out in handcuffs, her composure finally cracking. "You think this is over?" she hissed at Marissa as she was escorted past. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Marissa held her ground, her voice steady. "Neither do you." Back at the precinct, Lydia and her team began processing the documents. The evidence was overwhelming, tying Rebecca's family to fraud, money laundering, and even murder. As the adrenaline wore off, Marissa slumped into a chair, her hands trembling. Daniel sat beside her, his expression softening. "You were incredible tonight," he said quietly. "I was terrified," Marissa admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Bravery isn't about not being afraid," Daniel replied. "It's about doing the right thing anyway." Marissa looked at him, her eyes glistening. I want this to be over." "It will be," Lydia said, approaching them. "You've done more than enough, Marissa. Now it's up to us." In the weeks that followed, Rebecca's arrest dominated the headlines. The public was shocked by the revelations of her crimes, and the trial became a media circus. Marissa testified, recounting the threats she had received and the evidence they had uncovered. It was one of the most harrowing moments of her life, but she stood firm, her voice steady as she exposed the truth. Daniel also took the stand, detailing Rebecca's betrayal and her attempts to eliminate him. His testimony was damning, and combined with the mountain of evidence, it left no room for doubt. The verdict was swift. Rebecca was found guilty on all charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, her influence and power stripped away. As the gavel fell, Marissa felt a surge of relief. Justice had finally been served not just for her, but for her father and everyone Rebecca had hurt. In the aftermath of the trial, Marissa visited her father's grave for the first time in years. She knelt by the headstone, her voice steady as she spoke. "I did it, Dad," she said. "I found the truth, and I made sure she paid for what she did to you." The wind rustled through the trees, and for the first time, Marissa felt a sense of peace. Daniel approached Marissa with a proposal not for a relationship, but for a partnership. He wanted her to help run a foundation in her father's name, dedicated to helping victims of corporate corruption. Marissa hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for such a responsibility. But the more she thought about it, the more it felt right. "I'll do it," she said, a small smile breaking through. In the months that followed, Marissa and Daniel worked tirelessly to build the foundation. It became a beacon of hope for those who felt powerless, a way for Marissa to honor her father's legacy. Though her life had been irrevocably changed, Marissa found strength in her new purpose. She was no longer the invisible cleaner, but a woman who had fought for justice and won. One evening, as Marissa stood on the balcony of her modest new home, Daniel joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I can finally breathe," she replied. Daniel smiled, his gaze warm. You've earned it, Marissa. You've earned everything. As they stood together, watching the city lights twinkle, Marissa felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The shadows of her past had finally lifted, and for the first time, her future felt bright. As the reality of Rebecca's capture set in, Marissa found herself battling conflicting emotions. Relief mingled with fear as the enormity of the situation weighed on her. While Rebecca's arrest marked a major victory, Marissa knew that the powerful woman's influence didn't vanish overnight. The next day, Marissa joined Daniel and Detective Lydia Walsh in reviewing the evidence secured during the break-in. The stack of documents was overwhelming, detailing decades of financial corruption and illicit activities. At the center of it all was Rebecca, orchestrating the schemes with ruthless precision. This is enough to bring down her entire empire, Lydia said, her tone triumphant. Not just her, but the web of enablers who helped her stay untouchable. Marissa's voice wavered. Will it really be enough? Rebecca doesn't seem like the kind of person to give up without a fight. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's enough, Marissa, and if she tries to fight back, we'll be ready. Despite Rebecca's incarceration, her influence lingered. Her high-powered legal team launched a media campaign to discredit Daniel and Marissa. Headlines painted Rebecca as the victim of a vindictive husband and a scheming outsider. Ex-billionaire's wife frames power couple. Marissa read aloud from her phone, her frustration evident. They're spinning this like we're the villains. Daniel frowned. It's all smoke and mirrors. They're trying to sway public opinion, but the evidence speaks for itself. Lydia nodded in agreement. Rebecca's legal team is grasping at straws. Once the trial starts and the truth comes out, their narrative will fall apart. As the trial date approached, Marissa prepared to testify. The idea of facing Rebecca in court terrified her, but she knew it was a necessary step toward justice. In the courtroom, Marissa recounted everything she had endured, the threats, the break-in, and the truth about her father's murder. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, her resolve strengthened. She wanted to silence me, Marissa said, her gaze steady. But I couldn't let her win. Not after what she did to my father, and not after what she tried to do to Daniel. Rebecca's icy stare from across the courtroom didn't intimidate her. Marissa met her gaze head-on, refusing to back down. Daniel's testimony was equally powerful. He detailed Rebecca's betrayal, her embezzlement schemes, and her attempts to have him killed. The courtroom was riveted as he described the lengths Rebecca had gone to in order to protect her secrets. I loved Rebecca once, Daniel admitted. But the woman I married isn't the woman sitting here today. She's hurt countless people to maintain her power, and it's time for that to end. As the trial progressed, Rebecca's desperation became evident. She attempted to sway the jury with tears and claims of innocence, but her act faltered under cross-examination. When confronted with the overwhelming evidence of her crimes, Rebecca's mask slipped. Her anger boiled over, and she lashed out in court, accusing Marissa and Daniel of conspiring against her. You think you're better than me? She spat, her composure unraveling. You're nothing. Both of you. The outburst only solidified the jury's perception of her guilt. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Rebecca was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, her empire dismantled, and her reputation irreparably tarnished. Marissa exhaled a shaky breath as the verdict was read. The weight she had carried for so long began to lift. It's over, Daniel whispered, his voice filled with relief. Marissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. It's finally over. With Rebecca behind bars, Marissa focused on reclaiming her life. She returned to her father's grave, placing a single white rose on the headstone. I did it, Dad, she said softly. I found the truth, and I made sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. For the first time in years, Marissa felt at peace. Daniel approached Marissa with a new idea, creating a foundation in her father's name. The organization would provide legal aid to victims of corporate corruption, ensuring that no one else would suffer as her family had. Marissa hesitated. Are you sure this is what you want? You've already done so much. Daniel smiled. It's not just about what I want. It's about making a difference. Together, Marissa agreed, and the two began building the foundation, channeling their pain into a mission for justice. As the foundation grew, so did Marissa's confidence. She spoke at events, sharing her story and inspiring others to stand up against injustice. Daniel remained by her side, their partnership evolving into a bond rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. One evening, as they celebrated the foundation's first major success, Marissa reflected on how far she had come. "I never thought I'd be here," she said, raising a glass. "But I'm glad I am." Daniel clinked his glass against hers. "You've earned it, Marissa, and this is just the beginning." Marissa stood on the balcony of her new home, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The road to justice had been long and painful, but it had brought her to a place of strength and purpose. As Daniel joined her, she smiled. For the first time in years, the future felt bright. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "For what?" Daniel asked. "Whatever comes next." In the weeks following Rebecca's sentencing, Marissa found herself adjusting to a life no longer overshadowed by fear. The once overwhelming weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by a cautious optimism. Her new home was modest but comfortable, a far cry from the luxury apartment Daniel had provided during the investigation. She wanted a fresh start, something grounded in who she truly was. Each morning, she woke with a sense of purpose, heading to the newly established Robert Cole Foundation, named in honor of her father. The foundation was gaining traction quickly, providing legal aid and advocacy for victims of corporate corruption. Marissa immersed herself in the work, using her story to inspire others to stand up against injustice. She found strength in helping those who, like her, once felt invisible. With the trial fresh in the media, Marissa and Daniel became reluctant public figures. Reporters often sought them out, eager to capitalize on the story of betrayal, justice, and redemption. "Do you ever get used to it?" Marissa asked Daniel one afternoon as they prepared for an interview. Daniel chuckled, adjusting his tie. "Not really, but the attention helps the foundation, so it's worth it." The interview was professional yet personal. Marissa spoke openly about her father's legacy and the courage it took to confront Rebecca. Daniel shared his perspective, highlighting the importance of accountability at every level of society. By the end of the interview, Marissa realized that she no longer feared sharing her story. Instead, she saw it as a way to empower others. One evening, as Marissa prepared for bed, her doorbell rang. She hesitated, the old paranoia creeping back, but when she looked through the peephole, she saw a familiar face, Detective Lydia Walsh. Marissa opened the door, surprised. "Lydia, is everything okay?" Lydia offered a small smile. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. May I come in?" Once inside, Lydia handed Marissa a file. "I thought you want to see this. It's the final report on your father's case." Marissa's hands trembled as she opened the file. The details confirmed what she already knew. Rebecca's family had orchestrated Robert Cole's death to protect their empire. "I wanted you to have closure," Lydia said softly. Marissa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you. This means more than you know." The foundation's first major project was a success. They secured justice for a group of employees wronged by a corrupt corporation, their victories making headlines. Marissa threw herself into the work, finding healing in every life they helped. During a celebratory event, Marissa delivered a speech. "For too long, the powerful have preyed on the vulnerable. But today we're proving that change is possible. Together, we're building a world where justice is within reach for everyone." The crowd erupted in applause, and Marissa felt a surge of pride. She was no longer the invisible cleaner at the Empire Crown Hotel. She was a force for change. As Marissa and Daniel worked together, their bond deepened. What began as a partnership rooted in mutual necessity blossomed into a genuine connection. One evening, as they reviewed the foundation's progress, Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying Marissa. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were fearless." Marissa laughed softly. "I was terrified, but you didn't let it stop you," Daniel said, his voice filled with admiration. "You inspire me, Marissa." She met his gaze, warmth spreading through her chest. You inspire me too. Their relationship remained undefined, but neither felt the need to rush. They found comfort in their shared mission and the trust they had built. Marissa's work with the foundation brought her back to the Empire Crown Hotel, where she spoke to employees about workers' rights. The visit was bittersweet, stirring memories of her old life. As she walked through the lobby, she passed a cleaner dusting the marble staircase. Marissa paused, seeing her younger self in the woman's tired eyes. Thank you for everything you do, Marissa said, her voice sincere. The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled. Thank you. For the first time, Marissa felt truly at peace with her past. Despite her conviction, Rebecca attempted to appeal her sentence, claiming she was framed. The effort gained little traction, but it served as a reminder of her lingering presence. Marissa and Daniel remained vigilant, ensuring that Rebecca's influence couldn't reach them or the foundation. She won't stop, Marissa said one evening. She doesn't have to, Daniel replied. She's powerless now. Her actions will only backfire. Marissa nodded, finding solace in the truth of his words. The foundation expanded, establishing branches in cities across the country. Marissa became a respected advocate, her journey inspiring countless others to fight for justice. 1 year after Rebecca's conviction, Marissa returned to her father's grave. She brought a bouquet of white lilies, placing them gently on the headstone. I've done my best, Dad, she said softly. I hope I've made you proud. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying a sense of peace. On a quiet evening, Marissa and Daniel stood on the balcony of the foundation's new headquarters. The city lights stretched before them, a testament to how far they had come. What's next for us? Marissa asked, her voice thoughtful. Daniel smiled. Whatever we want. The hard part's behind us. Marissa gazed out at the horizon, her heart light. For the first time in years, she felt free to dream, free to build a life unburdened by the past. And as the stars began to dot the night sky, she knew that her journey wasn't just about justice. It was about finding herself and creating a future filled with hope. Rebecca Carrington's failed appeal marked the end of her direct influence, but the damage she caused left ripples that took time to settle. Marissa often found herself haunted by memories of Rebecca's icy glare in the courtroom or the ominous threats whispered over the phone. You can't let her live rent-free in your head, Lydia said over coffee one afternoon. The detective had become a friend and confidant in the months following Rebecca's trial. She's locked away. She can't touch you anymore. Marissa nodded, but the knots in her stomach remained. It's not her I'm worried about. It's everything she represented. People like her don't stop. There's always another one waiting in the wings. Lydia leaned back, her gaze thoughtful. Maybe, but people like you don't stop, either. That's why we're winning. The Robert Cole Foundation hosted its first community event, a free legal clinic for underrepresented workers. Hundreds of people showed up, some hesitant, others desperate for help. Marissa stood near the entrance, greeting attendees and directing them to the right tables. She recognized the fear and uncertainty in their faces. It was the same fear she had felt for so long. As the day progressed, she found herself speaking to a young woman named Andrea, who was on the verge of losing her job after exposing unsafe working conditions. I'm scared, Andrea admitted, her voice shaking. I can't afford to lose this job, but I can't stay silent either. Marissa placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I know exactly how you feel, and you're not alone. We'll fight this together. Andrea's eyes filled with gratitude, and Marissa felt a surge of pride. This was why she fought so hard to be the support system she once needed herself. After the success of the legal clinic, Daniel approached Marissa with a bold idea, expanding the foundation to tackle corruption on a larger scale. We've started something incredible, he said, gesturing to the bustling office around them. But there's so much more we can do. Investigative teams, educational programs, partnerships with whistleblowers. We could change the system. Marissa hesitated. That sounds massive. Do you think we're ready for that? Daniel smiled. We weren't ready for Rebecca either. But look what we accomplished. Marissa laughed, her confidence growing. All right, let's do it. Months turned into a year, and Rebecca's name gradually faded from the headlines. The public moved on to the next scandal, leaving her to languish in prison, forgotten by the world she once ruled. Marissa occasionally received updates from Lydia, who assured her that Rebecca's influence had been thoroughly dismantled. "She's not coming back," Lydia said firmly. Marissa finally allowed herself to believe it. Despite their progress, the foundation faced new challenges. A powerful corporation targeted by their investigations launched a smear campaign, accusing the foundation of fabricating evidence. "They're scared," Daniel said during an emergency meeting. "That's why they're fighting so hard." Marissa squared her shoulders. "Then let's give them a reason to be scared. If they think they can intimidate us, they're wrong." The foundation's legal team fought back with facts and transparency, dismantling the corporation's claims piece by piece. It was a hard-fought battle, but in the end, the truth prevailed. After the case was resolved, the foundation held a small celebration. Marissa stood before her team, raising a glass. "This isn't just about one victory," she said, her voice steady. "It's about proving that justice isn't just for the powerful. It's for everyone." Her words were met with cheers and applause. On a quiet evening, Marissa returned to her old neighborhood in Queens. She walked past the places she used to frequent, the corner store where she bought coffee, the park bench where she used to sit and dream of a better life. She stopped outside her old apartment building, a modest structure with peeling paint. It felt like another lifetime. As she turned to leave, she spotted a young girl sitting on the steps, scribbling in a notebook. Marissa paused, her curiosity piqued. "What are you working on?" she asked. The girl looked up, her eyes wide. "A story," she said shyly. Marissa smiled. "What's it about?" "It's about a girl who finds out she's stronger than she thought," the girl replied. Marissa's chest tightened. "That sounds like a good story. Keep writing." Back at the foundation's headquarters, Daniel waited for Marissa. Together, they reviewed plans for the next phase of their work, expanding into international advocacy. "This is just the beginning," Daniel said, his eyes filled with determination. Marissa nodded. "And we're ready for it." As they stood side by side, looking out at the city that had once felt so daunting, Marissa felt a sense of peace. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and built a life she could be proud of. For the first time, the future felt like a blank canvas, one she was ready to fill with hope, strength, and purpose. Marissa visited her father's grave one last time before the foundation's international launch. She placed a small plaque engraved with his name and the foundation's mission, to seek justice for all. "I'll keep fighting," she promised softly. "For you, and for everyone like you." As she stood, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light over the cemetery. Marissa took it as a sign, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always hope. She walked away with her head held high, ready to face whatever came next. As Marissa and Daniel stood on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle, a sense of purpose filled the air. "This is just the beginning," Daniel said with a smile. Marissa nodded, her voice steady. "And I'm ready for whatever comes next." Her words resonate with all of us, the power of standing up, seeking truth, and fighting for justice. If you've been inspired by Marissa's story, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives that remind us of the strength we all carry. Share this journey with others, and let's keep spreading hope and courage together.